And we've anticipated not only what they're going to need to know first, but we've figured out a way for us to be involved in as many of those 28 touch points as possible. So we're nearly guaranteeing that our company stays on the short list throughout the full journey. But in some cases, our content and our events experiences, like at the risk of getting a little meta, like our live streams and webinars and things like this, have made such a big impact on these stakeholders and the people that report to these stakeholders that in some cases we may have completely neutralized the competition. Hello, data center friends. It's a brand new week, and it's Joshua Feinberg here from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you are watching our weekly live stream, the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. This week, we have a host of really top-of-mind questions that are bothering and challenging and causing a lot of struggles with people in and around go-to-market teams in the data center industry. This includes co-location operators, hyperscale, wholesale, modular, edge, all kinds of outsourced data center operators, as well as the much broader data center technology, facilities, real estate, and construction ecosystems, plus all of the sales and marketing companies that work in and around the data center space. So what is on the agenda for today? We're going to start by looking at how can a sales service engineer, someone in a sales engineering role, better collaborate with their data center customers. Then we'll turn our attention to how to market and sell stationary battery solutions, energy storage solutions, stationary battery solutions to data center decision makers. And in that context, how do we get past gatekeepers? Next, we'll look at how a tier 3 data center facility can plan for a marketing campaign and draft an offer to potential customers. After that, we'll take a very quick break for a message from our sponsor, and then we'll return with 3 more top-of-mind questions on this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream. We'll look at how to get new climate technology solution business from data centers, those that are selling climate-related technology solutions. Then we'll look at how to market and sell data center financing of sustainable energy projects. Wow, that's a really, excuse the bad pun, hot area right now. Very top of mind. When I talk to people at data center operators and technology and facilities companies, real estate, construction companies, like half of the conversations have to do with something with heat reuse or sustainability or grid power issues. And the final question that we will be looking at for today is how do we generate leads for data center MEP system integration, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing related system integration. So again, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. And with that, let's jump into our first question for this week. So this viewer, this reader, listener wants to know, how can a sales service engineer better collaborate with their data center customers? That's a fantastic question, because depending on how your company's teams are structured, sales engineers can have lots of different roles. A sales engineer, where they're the only sales engineer in your company, will wear a lot more hats than when they're just one of potentially dozens of sales engineers in your company. So I like to, when I don't have context on company size, I usually go with the idea that we're dealing with a Goldilocks company, where it's not really small, it's not really an enterprise. So let's say this particular sales organization has a few dozen people on its team, of which maybe a handful are in sales engineering related roles. There's a couple of people in marketing supporting the sales team. There's a couple people in customer success dealing with onboarding and expansion, retention type of issues. You have a few product managers. You have a handful or two of channel partnerships managers supplementing the direct sales team. So in that context, let's think about what a sales engineer, sometimes also called a solutions engineer, but usually they're distinct jobs. And again, what this person is doing on a daily basis depends enormously on not only the business model of the company they work for, but the size of the team that they're on, as well as, to a certain degree, the size of the customers that they sell to. So, to better collaborate with data center customers, I think the idea is to get closer to those customers. How do you get closer to those customers? Well, visit. At the risk of oversimplifying, going out to visit these customers on a pretty regular basis ranks really high. And more than likely, you're not going to be the only one on the team that could benefit from visiting customers a lot more. And in a lot of ways, nearly every member of your go to market team, including sales development and account executives and marketing, customer success, product channel, just about everyone could benefit from spending more time visiting your most important customers. But in terms of collaboration, it starts with those customers coming in the door with the right expectations. So that starts long before you likely meet those customers. That starts from the very first marketing interactions. There's typically 28 interactions between a complete stranger and someone that becomes a new customer. So what can you do to support your company in being seen as the go-to experts in your space, the thought leaders, the industry leaders? So to the extent that you are carrying around a lot of institutional knowledge from all your years of experience doing great sales engineering in and around the data center industry, I would look to collaborate with your marketing team to see if you can take an active role in not only going out on these tours, on these site visits, on these field trips, whatever you want to call them, but I would look to see how you can take an active role in sharing your perspective in blogs and videos and webinars, getting involved in thought leadership projects, and trying to foster that same culture, that same collaborative thought leadership, subject matter expertise kind of culture among your peers who are other sales engineers, as well as account executives and some other people on that team. So I think that would make an enormous difference in being able to better collaborate, so that the know, like, and trust is starting to get built up before they ever formally meet you in the process, because they're consuming content assets that your company has published that you've been a part of, either with bylines content or being interviewed or being a panelist or some kind of role. So then it becomes a more natural that as they meet you during the sales process and you potentially hand this off to someone else in your company post sales, that you are seen as a trusted expert, as a trusted resource, as a trusted advisor. And then you're in a much better position to be able to explore collaborative opportunities, because hopefully when you're showing up with 3, 4, 5 experts from your company, you're also getting to meet multiple stakeholders from that company during the sales process, during the post-sales process, and there'll be some natural collaborations as you start to map out the different kinds of stakeholders that are involved at this client site, the different kind of personas, the different kind of job roles and functions. So there would be more natural fits for maybe you're working with someone on your marketing team or product marketing team or product manager to document a case study. Maybe you're going out to a conference and you're on a panel with the client, or you're inviting the client to your panel or something like that. Those are some great ways to collaborate. So you're getting deeper into that. But at the end of the day, your data center customers need to see you as more of a consultant and an advisor, and less of someone that's just sales support or just sales engineering. So the better job you can do with making them feel like that they're getting this great free expertise that rivals what they would get if they were spending $1,000 an hour or their local equivalent to hire like an enterprise, like Big Four kind of firm like Deloitte or KPMG or something like that. The more you can give off that vibe, the more you can position yourself in that way, the more meaningful and more impactful those collaborations are going to be. Next question. How can we market and sell stationary battery solutions to data center decision makers and get past gatekeepers? So you're in the stationary battery solutions category. You're trying to come up with a more effective marketing and sales strategy, specifically that gets to decision makers and gets past gatekeepers. That's a great one. So, where would I start? I would first start by looking at where your company has been most successful in the past. So, I would into the website and look for the case studies page, and I would start reading, watching the videos, anything that you have, any collateral, PDFs, whatever you have that helps you get a sense of where you've been most successful. Once you have that in place, then you can look at the commonalities among those customers. And what you're essentially looking for is enough commonalities that you can back into creating a simple one-page ideal client profile, often known as an ICP. And that ICP should list things like where your ideal clients are located. Is it a certain region? Is it a certain country? Is it a group of countries? Is it a continent? Be really specific there. What's their company size? Is there a certain size that's your sweet spot? Is there such a thing as a company that's too small or a company that's too large? So there's a size indicator. Usually in the data center space, people go to megawatts or kilowatts of power or square footage or something like that. But from a practical standpoint, at some point, that's going to need to map over to a certain number of employees if you're going to be using like a LinkedIn centric approach, because everything on LinkedIn, it's not based on square footage. It's not based on power. It's based on number of employees, like number of headcount. So to the extent that you can figure out how these case study customers, basically you look them up on LinkedIn and see what range, how many hundreds, how many dozens, how many thousands of employees they have, and use that as your range within your ideal client profile, because then it'll be way more actionable when you're doing filters in like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or if you're doing ad campaigns in the LinkedIn Campaign Manager tool. But either way, that'll help normalize things. So you have a geographic, you have a size indicator, and then there's more than likely going to be some business models that are better fit than others. Like, have your stationary battery solutions been more successful, for example, in manufacturing or hospitality or industrial? I don't know what the answers are for your company. Only you can answer that, but look for the commonalities among the kinds of businesses you work with, where they're located, and their sizes. So that'll inform your ideal client profile. From there, I want you to build a target account list of looking at, and you can use LinkedIn Sales Navigator as a great starting point for this, where you plug in basically the industry, you plug in the geographic, you plug in the company size, and it gives you a query of anywhere from dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of companies that potentially fit that. So you're able to build your target account list. These are the companies that you want to make a deliberate attempt to get your messaging in front of in the coming weeks and months and over time, years. So you have your ideal client profile, you have a target account list. The target account list is going to be used to power something that's often called ABM, which is short for account-based marketing. All that really means is you're being very deliberate about where you want your content to be landing, where you want your offers and messaging to be landing. So you have your client profile, you have your target account list. Next, think about the stakeholders that are most important for you to build relationships with in these target accounts. Who's the most important kind of stakeholder? Who is the second most important kind of stakeholder? Maybe there's a tertiary stakeholder. It's very obvious from your question that you're considering the decision maker the most important. So we'll call that the primary buyer persona. The primary buyer persona that's going to need to be based on some select speculation, as well as some educated guesses, as well as some actual research. And the actual research is incredibly important. You can do some of your buyer persona research by talking to internal stakeholders, like on your marketing, sales, product team, customer success team. But I'd encourage you to make sure that that internal research is only about 20% of what goes into documenting and developing and building out these buyer personas. 80%, most of your research should come from external, either from interviews, or if you don't have access to interviews, the next best thing is usually to look at how these kinds of stakeholders describe themselves on their LinkedIn profiles, the kind of content they share, where they hang out online and offline. When you do searches for them, what shows up in search footprint. A fantastic resource often is if you find videos sitting on YouTube of conference presentations they've made or webinars they've spoken at or podcast appearances. So you're able to watch how this person carries themselves, their tone, their behavior, basically their whole vibe. Because what you need to do is for each of these buyer personas is get consensus on what their biggest goals are, the things that they need to get done for their job that are critical to achieving their professional goals and their team's goals and their company's goals, and their biggest challenges, their biggest stressors, their biggest frustrations. When you know the consensus on their goals and you know the consensus on their challenges, it's much easier to create a marketing and sales plan where you're educating and building trust with these stakeholders long before they're ready for a sales conversation. And it's really important to play that long game, because in the world we live in right now, Gartner found that 83% of a typical buyer's journey is now over before someone is willing to speak with your sales team. 83%, meaning that you're no longer involved in any of these early and middle stage conversations because people have grown incredibly allergic to talking with sales professionals, and they're doing all of the self-driven research on their own. So the only way that you're able to earn a seat at the table and get invited in to talk to stakeholders for stationary battery solutions in the early part of their researching and comparing of options and evaluating pricing is if you show up as an educator, as a trusted advisor, as a consultant, as a subject matter expert, as a thought leader. If you show up as a salesperson, they're not going to give you the time of day. That if you want an era where that was still valid, find the Back to the Future DeLorean, go back 20 years, because that hasn't existed for a while. That number, that 83% 10 years ago was already 56%. Half of the journey was over before they talked to salespeople. But now it's like 83% and it's accelerating even more. So we have to show up as teachers, as experts. And the way we do this is we understand their biggest goals, their biggest challenges, and we create educational content and events experiences where we can not only proactively address what they want to know, but share insights about how other companies just like theirs and other stakeholders in these companies just like them have navigated these exact issues. How are we able to anticipate what these future issues look like? Because we've done our homework. We've built out the buyer personas. We've built out the content strategy, and we've anticipated not only what they're going to need to know first, but we've figured out a way for us to be involved in as many of those 28 touch points as possible. So we're nearly guaranteeing that our company stays on the short list throughout the full journey. But in some cases, our content and our events experiences, like at the risk of getting a little meta, like our live streams and webinars and things like this, have made such a big impact on these stakeholders and the people that report to these stakeholders that in some cases, we may have completely neutralized the competition. So your decision maker will almost certainly be your primary buyer persona. The gatekeeper will probably either be secondary or tertiary buyer personas. And then it's just a matter of figuring out for your category of stationary battery solutions and your price point and your target market and stuff like that. What are the job functions? What are the job titles to decide whether you actually need a tertiary buyer persona, or is anyone that's like reports to one or two levels below or adjacent to or what have you in that same company an effective secondary buyer persona. So for batteries, it may be a technology person. It's probably a facilities person. But again, it depends on the size of the data center that you're selling to, how specialized those roles are, or how many different hats that particular person is wearing at any given time. So that's going to largely be a function of the size of the companies, your ideal client profile, and the nature of their businesses. But yeah, what we need to do is we need to get in early. We need to use content and context to provide enormous value. So we're educating and building trust at scale, and then using those continued touch points like email and social and webinars and even some offline events to a certain degree to try to be involved in as many of those 28 touch points as possible. So we stay with them throughout the full buyer's journey as they advance from awareness to consideration to decision. So those are some of the most really impactful things that I'd be thinking about when it comes to marketing and selling stationary battery solutions to data center decision makers and how to get past gatekeepers. Oh, one more thing to keep in mind with the gatekeepers is when you get in early Do not get discouraged if you're getting someone who is from the perfect company, but is what you're calling a gatekeeper, meaning that they are a direct report or a second level report or something like that of someone that's the decision maker. Why? Because even if you get to the decision maker, that person is not going to make a decision without consulting with the rest of their team. People have gotten so risk averse in the last few years. You could use the most incredibly impactful sales and marketing judo tricks to get some face time with the decision maker, and you're still not going to be effective if you haven't gotten consensus among the rest of their team. However, the beauty of providing helpful educational content, whether it's downloadable content or podcasts or webinars, is it's far more likely that someone that is on that team will share your content or will share your event information around to others on their team, because at that point, they're not having to endorse you as a company. All they're doing is saying, hey, Bob, hey, Sally, there's a really cool webinar coming up next week. I'm attending. You may want to attend as well. How do we encourage that to happen? We use email marketing technology that's been around for more than 10 years. When they sign up, they get an email back that says, hey, John, who else should attend from your team? Companies that need stationary battery solutions, these are always, it takes a village. So who else on your team needs to know about this? And you encourage them to hit the forward button. That's one of the most effective ways to get consensus on the whole committee. And you do enough of that well, you'll get to the decision makers. But the reality is, even if you get to the decision makers, you still need all the other stakeholders. So use your great educational content, great insightful content that helps them with their professional goals to get your company spread around. So they start to fall in love with your content. And by extension, they're falling in love with your brand. And then before you know it, you're so deep into this company that you're certain to be among the consideration set when they flip over from consideration to the decision stage of the journey. Next question. How does a tier 3 data center facility plan for a marketing campaign and draft an offer to potential customers? So you're in a tier 4 data center facility and you're working on marketing and sales enablement and drafting an offer to potential customers. So what should you keep in mind? Well, hopefully your company has achieved product market fit, meaning that you know PMF. Product market fit means you know exactly who your ideal clients are. You know exactly what they're going to purchase or lease or commit to from your data center. You know the price points that they do this at. You know the terms that they sign up for, and you probably also have a pretty good idea of the average sales cycle length. If you can answer those 4 or 5 questions about your ideal clients, more than likely this is documented on your website in your case studies, and more than likely you've documented this into an ideal client profile, an ICP, that deals with things like company size and location and industry. And it's possible you have more than one ideal client profile. Sometimes when I talk to people in go-to-market or sales and marketing related roles in data centers, they sometimes have like a plan for clients that are relatively local. You know, they're within a half hour to an hour drive of the data center. And then they have a whole separate go-to-market plan for national clients and potentially even global clients where they would have to take a flight or more than a flight to get to your location, because it's a very, very different kind of process. The local clients, for example, the local prospects, it's not a huge lift to create this great educational content strategy that centers around events and physically having the events at your data center. I would lean more towards educational events where they're allowing you to share your subject matter expertise and they're seeing you as a trusted advisor, and couple that with like tours, as opposed to just pure networking events. But I know a lot of data centers that have gotten super creative with event marketing, field marketing over time, and they do food truck events and they do golf tournaments and they do pool parties and they take clients to baseball games and football games and hockey games and things like that. There's a lot of things you can do just for all of this, keep in mind that in most cases, you're going to need a couple dozen touch points, like 28 touch points or something like that, in between complete stranger and a purchase decision as they navigate through awareness to consideration and then consideration to decision. So just like a general manager on a sports team needs to spread their budget around, just like the CEO of a tier 3 data center needs to spread their hiring budget around, you need to be able to spread your marketing and sales budget around. So don't spend 50% of your annual budget on one particular thing unless you're certain that it works, because you really, again, need to cover those 28 touch points. So if you're local, you can do webinars and you can do offline webinars or in-person webinars. What does that mean? Is very similar content, but it's done in a room. It could be, if your data center has a conference room that holds 20 people, you can do small, relatively impactful, very low cost kind of events where the same kind of content that you would do on Zoom or go to webinar, StreamYard, or on 24 or WebEx or something like that, you're doing in person. And you can bundle that with like a lunch and learn series or a breakfast seminar or a happy hour or something like that. They'll probably find your content way more amusing in a happy hour than they will over coffee and bagels. But experiment with these. So there's different options that you have depending on whether you're targeting local or targeting national and global. Obviously, with national and global, the online strategy with webinars and streams becomes way more important. And again, you want to be creative and do your homework on who this ideal client profile is, who the most important buyer personas are within that ideal client profile, and what you can do to add value to their professional lives once you understand your primary and secondary buyer persona's biggest goals and challenges. Their biggest goals and challenges should help inform your whole strategy for getting someone that's a complete stranger into your company's fold, into your company's world, for awareness and then ultimately consideration and decision. So in terms of drafting an offer to potential customers, it really depends on how warm they are. Just bear in mind that most prospects really don't want to talk to sales teams anymore until they're very, very far along in the buyer's journey. Gartner puts that number at 83%, meaning they're going to be 83% done with researching, evaluating options, and comparing pricing before they're really open to talking to someone in a sales context. So we need to be very creative about how we earn a seat at the table, about how we earn a way into their lives, into their mindset for that first 83%. And in almost all cases, it needs to be educational content that helps them navigate through the professional goals they're trying to achieve, and helps them figure out solutions to the things that are really stressing them out and challenging them right now. In terms of offers, you want to contextualize it for who they are and where they are in their journey. For someone that's a complete stranger, a great offer is to try to get them to consume a piece of content or attend an event that you're sponsoring. The more the event frames you and your team as the go-to experts, the more impactful the event is going to be. So you could conceivably invite them to visit you at a booth at a conference that you're exhibiting at, but it is way, way, way more impactful if you can get that person to spend a half hour to an hour with you, where you're teaching them something helpful that will help them do a better job of figuring out and addressing a goal that they need to achieve for their job, or figuring out a solution to something that's causing them to have to lose a lot of nights and weekends and time away from their family. So that's an effective awareness stage offer. In the consideration stage, helping them navigate the different options that are in front of them, like comparison guides or webinar versions of that, evaluating how to find the best tier 3 data center for your manufacturing company or financial services company, or whatever it is that you're doing, can be amazingly impactful. And then at the decision stage, for a tier 3 data center, for a co-location data center, if they're local, the most natural offer is to get them to schedule a tour to come in and see your facility. If they're not local, then you probably need to do something virtual that you're going to deliver with an eye towards the call to action at the end of that, to figure out whether they can successfully make a decision without physically visiting, by having, obviously you can give them a virtual tour. You can have virtual tours on demand that are sitting on your website, either gated or ungated, whatever works best for you. But your call to action at the decision stage is more than likely one-on-one contact with someone that should be positioned more as a solutions advisor or consultant, and less like a transaction focused real estate salesperson. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on developing effective marketing and sales strategy and a marketing campaign and potential offers to future clients of a tier 3 data center facility. So, with that, we're just about at the halfway mark for this week's show. So, we're going to take a quick break for a message from our sponsor.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
Hey, it's Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you are watching this week's live stream of the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. The next question that I'm going to address today is, how do we get new climate technology business from data centers? So your company is in the climate technology space and you work with data centers. So how are we going to get new business? How are we going to generate leads? How are we going to accelerate those leads into sales opportunities and close those sales opportunities into absolutely delighted new customers? What it largely comes down to is we need to know who these customers are that we're trying to attract. Do you have existing customers that we're trying to clone and replicate and get more of, or is your company a brand new startup? If your company is a brand new startup, the number one goal is to do enough experiments with content and messaging and value proposition and packaging and pricing to get our company to product market fit, PMF, as rapidly as possible. Product market fit tells you the degree to which you know exactly who your ideal clients are, what products and services they purchase from you, the price points and the frequencies and durations at which they purchase those products and services from you, and ideally also knowing the sales cycle and profitability. So there's 4, 5, 6 questions that are incredibly important to get consensus around to satisfy what you're looking to do with product market fit to achieve the ability to get strong demand. And typically the next step, the next big milestone beyond product market fit is go-to-market fit, GTMF. Go-to-market fit is what happens when you pour jet fuel on all of this. What can you do to get everything to accelerate even faster as you scale up marketing and sales and customer success and channel partnerships? So with that in mind, how do we get new clients for climate technology business from data centers? So since we likely already have product market fit, we probably have or should have some case studies about companies that have been most successful with our climate technology. Once we have those case studies, in most cases, what you're trying to do is do a big copy and paste job. Is we're trying to take those companies where we've been most successful and get a lot more clients just like those clients that are in our website case studies, video case studies, PDF case studies, whatever you're using. And it probably should be all of the above, but that's a whole separate question. So to get more clients like that, we need to know what those companies have in common at the company level in terms of their size, their industry, their business model, where they're located. Once we know those, we can document our ideal client profile. Once we have our ideal client profile, we can take that information and go to something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and we can do searches for companies that fit that criteria. We can build out a target account list of the companies that we want to get our content in front of and that we want to educate and build trust with and get them to engage with us and invite them to our events like this, like our webinars and online events and potentially offline events to build relationships with the right people in these companies, our primary and our primary and our secondary buyer personas. So understanding, so the ideal client profile tells you what we're looking for at the company level. The buyer personas tell us what we're looking for at the people level. What are the most important kinds of people that we need to build relationships with in these companies? What are their job roles? What's their daily routine like? What are their biggest goals? What are their biggest challenges? And when we're able to get consensus on that, we can build something scalable around getting more clients for your climate technology business. So the most important category of stakeholders we need to build relationships with, that's going to be your primary buyer persona. The second most important category of people we need to build relationships with is going to be a secondary buyer persona. For data center related clients, a lot of who these stakeholders are will depend on their company size and how much versatility they have in their given roles. For things that are related to climate technology, you could be interacting with facilities managers, you could be interacting with construction managers. If they're really small data centers, you may be interacting with just a data center manager or even a CTO or something like that, that wears a lot of different hats. But it really depends on the nature of your business model, your products and services, and their company size, who's going to be the most logical person that you want to be building these relationships with. And then once you have your target account list, once you have detailed buyer personas written out on what their biggest goals and challenges are, then we go about developing a content strategy that educates and builds trust with these people over an extended period of time, as well as a promotional strategy, a distribution strategy on how we get that content in front of them. What tends to work extremely well in the data center space are formats that have been around for quite some time, but just have become way more popular in the self-driven world, in the self-service world that we now live in, where so many people strongly prefer a self-service buyer's journey where they're only willing to talk with salespeople when they're almost ready to purchase. So in this kind of environment, downloadable content, video, podcasts, email marketing, webinars, a lot of webinars, really good, impactful webinars that help educate and build trust with the companies, with the buyer personas, with the decision committees that you need to build relationships with, can be enormously helpful as long as you're adding value. How do you know you're adding value? Because you've gotten consensus on what they care most about, their biggest goals and their challenges, and you're obsessed about giving, over delivering on value, of helping them figure out answers to these biggest questions or goals they're trying to figure out, or solutions to these biggest challenges and stressors and blockage points that are going on in their company, where your climate technology can really help them navigate around that. So a typical buyer's journey, you have like awareness and then consideration and decision. And there can be as many as 28 different touch points that happen between a complete stranger and a purchase decision. So the goal really is to figure out a way that you can stay with them throughout that full buyer's journey in as many of those 24 or so touch points that are possible. So you're certain to stay on the short list. And in many cases, you may even neutralize a lot of the competitors along the way because you've framed all the criteria that they use to evaluate all of the other options. So if you're looking to get new business from data centers for your climate technology, think about what you can do to be seen as the go-to expert in the space. And for everyone on your go-to-market team across marketing, sales development, account executives, customer success, product channel partnerships, for as many people on the team as possible to be seen as the go-to experts on your space, teachers, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders, because it's a completely different context shift than someone thinking that you're just trying to prospect them and just trying to close a transaction-focused sale. No one needs anyone to read the website to them anymore. Those days are long, long gone. So we need to show up and give off the vibe of being like a big four consultant, like $1,000 an hour or local currency equivalent consultant that's just providing enormous value to helping to figure out how they're going to get this impact of more effectively using climate technology in their business. That's what I would aim for if you're really serious about growing your business in today's environment and beyond, is to be super realistic about your buyer persona's preferences for how they interact with your company and meet them where they are. Not where you'd like them to be, but where they actually are. Next question. How do we market and sell data center financing of sustainable energy projects? How do we market and sell financing of sustainable energy projects for data centers? That's a terrific one. It's certainly top of mind. Easily half of the conversations I have with every week with people in the data center industry, focus on something having to do with energy consumption, grid power constraints, the world running out of electricity, EV cars, fighting for power with data centers fighting for power with local communities. So sustainability and energy is an incredibly important topic to be looking at. But we know that these take major, major investments. And in some cases, you see governments trying to fill the gap with tax incentives. But the reality is overhauling infrastructure takes significant investments. So it stands to reason that how you're going to finance these definitely can be an issue. So when it comes to marketing and selling the financing of these projects, it's really important to figure out your business model, what you've been most successful in doing in the past, where have you had the greatest success, and using that to figure out what your ideal client profile is for the kinds of companies that you want to be selling into and the types of stakeholders within those companies. Like, for example, when it comes to financing of sustainable energy projects, who do you need to be educating and building trust with? Who are you creating this content for? Who are you inviting to your webinars? Who are you hoping that shows up to your webinars? Who are their coworkers, their bosses that they should be inviting to come along? And only you can answer that question. Off the top of my head, maybe it's developers, maybe it's real estate investors, like people that work for big REITs, real estate investment trusts. Maybe it's CFOs, chief financial officers. But again, it depends on the nature of your business model. It depends on, from your business model, what goes on your ideal client profile, your ICP. What size companies are we talking about? What industries are they in? What geographies are they in? Very, very possible that when it comes to finances, that you have a certain country or certain region you can do business in, and it may not be as easy to do business outside of that region. So there's certainly going to be a geographic component. There's certainly maybe a size component where the company is either too big or too small. So you kind of figure out the sweet spot, thinking more like Goldilocks with all of that. There may be certain business models or industries that are a better fit than others. If you're doing enterprise data centers as opposed to data center operators like co-location, wholesale, and hyperscale. Maybe what you're doing is an especially good fit for wholesale and hyperscale, but not so much for co-location, or vice versa. Or maybe it works great with edge data centers or modular data centers. Again, I can't answer all of these questions for you. It's the nature of what your business model is and where you've been most successful. But this is the thought process I would go through, is trying to get really specific on who the companies are, to the point where you can literally take that information, go to like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, put in industries, put in company sizes, put in the geographic component, and you should be able to build out lists of anywhere from a few dozen to hundreds or thousands of potential companies that you want to build these relationships with. And then think about, within these companies, who's the most important and second most important stakeholder that you want to build these relationships with. And each of those should get a very well-researched, documented buyer persona. They will end up being multiple pages that goes through each of this job functions, biggest goals that they're trying to achieve in their professional job, the biggest challenges that they're struggling with right now. And then once you have that in mind, and you know where they hang out online and offline, what skills they're endorsed for, once you have consensus on that, it's much, much easier to develop a effective marketing and sales, to develop effective go-to-market, to be able to reach the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all, in the right context, so you get your foot in the door the right way, so they see you and your company as the go-to experts in your space, and not just another financing vendor who's going to nag them into oblivion until you can beg for a meeting. You don't want to be in the meeting begging business. You want to approach this the right way, so they see you as a consultant, a teacher, a trusted advisor, and you help them not only better understand what the best financing potentially looks like for their company, but because you're staying with them throughout the full journey, you have a dramatic influence on how they evaluate all their options that are in front of them in the consideration stage of the journey. And you're nearly if you do this the right way, you're nearly guaranteed to be on the short list when they get to the point where they're ready for sales contact, when they're at that decision stage. And in some cases, in small situations or very specialized situations, your approach to content and sales enablement and thought leadership may have successfully neutralized all or nearly all of the competitive options in front of them. So those are my thoughts on how to more effectively market and sell data center financing of sustainable energy projects. One more question, the final question that we're going to address in this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show is, drumroll, how do we generate leads for data center MEP system integration projects, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing projects? So how are we generating leads for those kind of mechanical, electrical, plumbing kinds of projects for data centers? Well, we have to figure out, who do we want to be doing these projects for? What kinds of companies? Are we selling these to co-location developers? Are we selling these to wholesale companies? Are we selling to hyperscale companies? Are we looking to do subcontract work for builders, for developers of data centers? Are we looking to do renovations for existing data centers where the data center facilities manager or internal construction manager? We need to be able to answer these questions and get a lot more specific about who we want these leads to be. So as long as your company is established and you already have a client list and a book of business, then you more than likely have done things over time like case studies, right, for your website. So from the consensus on those, use that to figure out who the ideal client is at the company level. This will help you to build out an ideal client profile so you know their location, their business model, their company size. Because certainly when it comes to doing mechanical, electrical, plumbing kinds of work, there's almost certainly some geographic constraints. You have to be able to get the labor there. You have to be able to get the parts there. Lots of visits, lots of supervision. Very FaceTime intensive. Definitely not something that's going to be delivered virtually. So there's a geographic component to that. There's a size component more than likely, where your company may be a really good fit for certain size companies, maybe that are not too small but not too big. Again, only you can answer that question. And there may be certain kind of projects that you're a better fit for. Are you a really great fit for working with really small, like edge data centers? Or maybe you're especially good with a certain amount of kilowatts or megawatts of co-location facilities. Or maybe you do especially well as a subcontractor for general contractors on major projects. Again, I can't answer those questions for you. That's how you're going to iterate and develop your business over time. But when it comes to generating leads and nurturing those leads into sales opportunities, and that second distinction is super important. I see all too often people come to me and they ask for leads, and what they really mean is sales opportunities, meaning that it's the right person. You know exactly who they are. You've educated and built some trust with them. And now they're ready to talk to your company about doing business with you. And given that so much of the world now is tremendously allergic to spending time with sales teams until they're at the absolute end of your process, it's incredibly important that you have a strategy for generating early stage leads so you can stay with those individuals and get them to share that information with others on their team as early as possible on their journey. So you're educating and building trust with them through like downloadable content, through blogs, through podcasts, through videos, through webinars, very similar to this, and offline versions of this, where you can educate and build trust at scale in a one-to-many type of motion, where you're encouraging people that are attending those webinars, those educational events, to invite their colleagues and peers and potentially their boss. So you're getting known among the full team, the full decision by committee type of team within these companies. That's a really, really essential approach to making sure that you're generating the right kinds of, not just leads, but nurturing them and staying with them throughout the full journey so they materialize into very warm, very well nurtured, very educated sales opportunities, because you've found a place to be involved in as many of those 28 touch points as possible between complete stranger and closed sales. So when it comes to lead generation for a mechanical, electrical, plumbing, contracting types of work, it's super important to be very specific about the kind of company that you want to be doing business with, who are the stakeholders that you want to build these relationships with, like the job functions, their roles, their titles, what's top of mind for the primary and the secondary buyer persona, and how can you show up in a way so that you and your team are seen as the go-to experts, the teachers, the consultants, the trusted advisors, the thought leaders in this space about anything and everything that can make their construction projects more successful by imparting all of your institutional knowledge, words of wisdom, and best practices in a way that earns you a virtual seat at the table throughout the full buyer's journey, dramatically impacts how they navigate the competitive choices in front of them, and largely assures that by the time they're ready for a sales related conversation, that you're extremely, extremely deeply embedded in that company already. So that is the final question that we have for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing live Q&A show. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To keep up with what we're doing next, to learn about upcoming events just like this, make sure that you subscribe to our email newsletter, the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that goes out every Sunday, delivered to your inbox. You can sign up for that. You can subscribe on our website at DCSMI.com. Until next week, I'm Joshua Feinberg. Have a great week, and we wish you tremendous success in growing your data center related business. Take care now.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.